Welcome to The Explainer! Today, we're unpacking a movie you probably remember as just a totally chaotic, laugh-out-loud comedy from 1974. But beneath all those blazing guns and slapstick gags, there's something so much deeper going on. We're gonna deconstruct Blazing Saddles and see how it wasn't just a random collection of jokes, but a deliberate, brilliant social experiment. Let's get right into it.
Picture this. Mel Brooks screens the very first cut of Blazing Saddles for Warner Brothers, and the room goes completely dead silent. I mean, the executives were terrified. This film was tackling race, religion, gender, literal no-go zones for Hollywood back then. One exec even flat out said that releasing it would cause nationwide riots. But Brooks, he just puts on his sunglasses and drops this iconic line, "If they riot, at least they'll be laughing while they do it." He actually convinced the studio that the sheer offensiveness was exactly what made the film so honest.
So there's this massive contrast between how the film was first perceived and what it actually pulled off. On one side, you've got this movie that was nearly banned, just packed with profanity and toilet humor. But on the other side, the reality is that it's a culturally significant masterpiece. In 2006, it was literally added to the U.S. Library of Congress's National Film Registry, sitting right there next to Citizen Kane and The Godfather. The extreme vulgarity was basically a Trojan horse. It completely masked a deeply intellectual critique of American society.
Now, to really understand this masterpiece, we've got to talk about the studio shock and the absolute chaos behind the scenes.
Because the struggle to cast this thing is legendary. First off, Mel Brooks actually wrote the lead role of Sheriff Bart specifically for the brilliant Richard Pryor, but the studio, they rejected Pryor flat out because of his controversial past. So, step 2, in walks Cleavon Little, a relative unknown who makes Brooks laugh for 10 straight minutes and wins the part, as a slightly more refined version of Pryor's vision. Step 3 is wild. Oscar winner Gig Young gets cast as the Waco Kid, but he literally passes out drunk on camera on day 1. Which leads to step 4. Brooks makes a desperate last-minute call to his buddy Gene Wilder, who flies in to save the entire production.
And man, the surprising production details just keep coming. For instance, the script was originally called Tex X, a politically charged play on Malcolm X, but the studio forced Brooks to change it. Also, Brooks actually asked John Wayne to make a cameo. Wayne loved the script, laughed his head off, but turned it down, saying it was just too dirty, joking that every old lady in Texas would throw a Bible at him. Oh, and during that massive, chaotic brawl at the end of the film, an extra was legitimately punched in the face, giving him a very real bloody nose. Brooks loved the rawness of it so much, he just kept it in the final cut.
Which brings us to a major turning point, the absolute magic of Gene Wilder.
This completely chaotic set really needed an anchor. When Wilder read the script, he told Brooks he didn't want to just be another lunatic yelling at society. He asked, "Is this a movie where we just yell at people?" And Brooks said, "No, we're yelling at the people who think they are society." Wilder cracked up and agreed to do it, but with one major condition. He wanted total creative freedom to play the character drunk, burned out, and absolutely honest on screen. Brooks agreed on the spot and didn't touch a single one of Wilder's lines. And that creative freedom completely transformed the tone of the work. Wilder anchored all that surrounding lunacy by bringing this incredibly sad, gentle soul to Jim, the Waco Kid. In a world just full of noise, prejudice, and absolute fools, Brooks and Wilder built this brilliant, upside-down logic. The failed, washed-up alcoholic was literally the only person perceptive enough to see Sheriff Bart's true goodness. It made him the quiet hero of the whole story.
So how did this all come together into a social experiment disguised as a comedy?
Let's look at the thematic core of the film. When the racist citizens of Rock Ridge shout in absolute shock at their new black sheriff, the audience laughed. But like half a second later, they realize exactly what they're laughing at. Why are we really laughing when the townspeople act so horribly? Mel Brooks wasn't just fishing for a chuckle here. He was setting a trap.
It's a brilliant use of what we call the mirror effect. The film turns that laughter into a mirror, transforming a simple comedic gag into a direct indictment of discrimination. It exposes just how utterly ridiculous bigotry really is. And remember Richard Pryor? Even though he didn't star in it, he stayed on as a co-writer. Pryor was absolutely crucial in balancing those racially charged lines, making sure the humor was deeply truthful and targeted prejudice perfectly without ever tipping over into actual hatred.
Years later, in 1993, Brooks summed up his intent perfectly. He said, "If this movie offends you, it's because it's talking about you." His goal was to mock racists, definitely not to promote racism. You have to remember, in the politically tense climate of post-MLK America, this movie acted as a massive pressure release valve for the whole country. It let people confront some seriously uncomfortable truths, but from the safety of a comedy theater.
But the film didn't stop at social norms. It also completely deconstructed the classic Western.
Brooks literally took a sledgehammer to the squeaky clean rules of Hollywood cinema. Think about classic Westerns, that whole John Wayne mythos. They were defined by serious heroism, impossibly clean cowboys, riding off into a beautiful sunset. Blazing Saddles completely inverted all of that. Instead, we got group fart scenes, characters literally breaking the fourth wall to talk to us, and an ending where the heroes ride right off the studio set, hop into a limousine, and just drive away. Brooks shattered the illusion to remind us that behind those grand Western myths were just flawed, ridiculous, very human people.
And honestly, nothing shattered Hollywood's polite rules quite like the legendary campfire bean scene. Believe it or not, this was Hollywood's very first group fart scene. The studio execs were horrified. They tried to cut it 10 different times, but Brooks stood his ground. He called it a manifesto for honest bodily comedy. Because let's face it, Western heroes eat beans and sleep outdoors. It's just the truth. And when test audiences laughed for 2 straight minutes, it proved that viewers were more than ready to laugh at crude human reality.
Here's a really fun hidden detail. Brooks didn't just direct the movie, he actually played 3 different roles in it. He's the vain governor, Lepetamain, the old Jewish elder in town, and the Yiddish-speaking director of the fake film at the very end. Brooks later said he wanted to be everywhere because he was the chaos of the movie. These 3 characters represent corrupt politics, old tradition, and mad art. And when you smash those 3 pieces of American society together, total chaos is exactly what you get.
So what does all of this mean for the legacy of this masterpiece?
Well, let's look at the number 20. That is how many years the film was heavily censored on American television. The FCC stepped in and demanded over 25 lines be cut because of slurs and profanity. And yep, the fart scene was entirely wiped out. So for 2 whole decades, TV audiences only saw this severely sanitized version. It wasn't until unedited broadcasts finally aired on premium cable in the 90s that a wider audience really grasped its true anti-racist satire.
Now think about the number 40. Fast forward 40 years to an anniversary screening in Los Angeles back in 2014. An 88-year-old Mel Brooks is sitting in the audience just watching the crowd. And when the townspeople shouted their famously prejudiced lines and this modern audience burst into knowing, self-aware laughter, Brooks lowered his head and cried. He realized the world had actually changed. The social barriers his comedy had targeted were breaking down, and people finally completely understood what he had been trying to say all those years ago.
A library selection board member once beautifully said that Brooks turned an offense into a prayer for justice, which leaves us with a pretty provocative thought. If a crude, chaotic comedy from 1974 could do that much heavy lifting to challenge society, what sacred rules does Hollywood need to break today to tell the truth? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope it changes how you look at this incredible piece of cinematic history next time you watch it.